This podcast contains adult language and stories of true crime. If you don't like laughing, crying, or being horrified at the actions of other humans, this podcast is not for you.
Listeners, welcome to Season 4, Episode 22 of Resolved Mysteries. This is the show where we rewatch, recap, and give you the latest updates to cases featured on the show Unsolved Mysteries, and I'm Eliza.
I'm Alison.
And I'm Karlin.
Welcome to the show where we've got some interesting epis coming up in the next little bit for you, so we're excited. We had mentioned donating to this nonprofit a while back, and our patron Tara M. reminded Alison about it. So this month's is the Cold Case Investigative Research Institute. The Cold Case Investigative Research Institute is a registered 501c3 nonprofit that assists families and law enforcement with unsolved homicides, missing persons, and kidnapping cases. This one-of-a-kind band of all volunteer crime fighters are students and nationally recognized experts. The nonprofit organization is made up of experts such as profilers, detectives, crime analysts, prosecutors, and crime scene investigators.
So cool.
So cool.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
So if you want to help support this organization, you can leave us a review on wherever you listen to your podcasts. Apple Podcasts would be great, and we will donate $1 for every review that we receive. And thanks, Tara, for the reminder.
Yeah, thanks, girl.
Allison, it seems like you should volunteer to be part of this organization.
Oh, my God. What a dream. I should have went into law enforcement, but whatever.
Oh, well.
I majored in a bunch of other stupid shit instead.
All right. Karlin, do you want to shout out some patrons?
Oh, sure. Shout out to Jenny N., Lacey L., Lindsay H., Lauren L., Nicole H., and Sarah V. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
Thanks,
guys.
guys.
And if you would like to get a shout out on the show or be able to suggest a nonprofit for us to donate to, like Tara M. did, and then you'll also support us, you can go to Patreon and get ad-free episodes, 2 additional episodes a month, and early access to listener short stacks. So you can go to patreon.com/Resolved Mysteries Podcast, and we'd love to have you over there. Okay, we have a 2-parter. So part 1 of episode 22 is going to be what, Karlin, you start.
Well, the first segment is an unexplained seggy, and it's a big, big biggie.
It's a big old pile of dirt.
It's a really
And
big.
a big old boat.
And it's Noah's Ark.
Wow.
And then I have, wow, indeed. And then I have the second segment, and it is the unexplained death of Tracy Wofford-Bunn.
And then in part 2.
In part 2, we've got a Lost Loves about Dolores Stratt. Oh my gosh, it is going to be way too nice for you, so just forewarning.
And then I have a missing persons segment about Colleen Reed.
Awesome. All right. Ready?
Okay, Noah, we're coming.
We're coming for you, Noah.
Oh, I think I feel a little rain.
Build that boat quick, hurry.
It is Portland. I mean, we always get rain for 40 days and 40 nights, so
It's true.
I
I
don't
was
even
like-
want to hear it, Noah.
Just the huge. All right, let's do it. Okay, so this is the unexplained seggy about Noah's Ark. Stack intros saying that Noah's Ark is one of the most famous and evocative of all Bible stories. And then he gives us the Cliff Notes version of the story in case someone's never heard it, which I don't know how that's possible. He says, God looked down at the earth and saw that it had become evil and wicked and ordered Noah to build an ark. Then we see a painted depiction of the ark being constructed, which after watching, Eliza texted us a picture of this and asked, could we possibly care any less about this? And also, why are the people that are constructing the ark naked?
They are so naked.
They're completely naked, and as she said, Noah could not be more clothed. He's wearing like 7 bed sheets.
Noah's like, I'll take yours. Thank you.
Yes.
But all construction must be done naked. Okay, so back to the segment. God tells Noah that the ark needs to have different rooms, and he also says cover it in pitch. He told Noah to make it have 3 floors, and he also told him to bring 2 of every living thing on the ark to keep them alive with him.
Oh, gosh.
Which I'm like, how did they find that much pitch? Like,
That's your question?
all the trees. All the trees.
That's
how
your
did
call
he do
out.
that? It just sounds like a really messy job.
Fascinating.
It's not how did they find 2 elephants. It's how did they find
and
that
2
much
of
pitch.
every little bug, every little amoeba. We have 2 of everything.
I do have a question because you bring up a good point, like who hasn't heard this story, but like we obviously heard this story growing up and going to Sunday school, and then my grandma had, even though she wasn't like super religious, they were Episcopalian, but our grandkids' room in her house, like when we'd go stay, was Noah's Ark themed.
Oh my goodness, yes.
You can imagine, like, you know, in the 90s when those tapestry blankets were really popular and they'd have a picture on them, but they
Yes.
were threads.
Yeah.
Yes.
She had a lot of Noah's Ark. Anyway, but Alison, how do you know the story of Noah's Ark? Did you ever hear it?
Well, I think like Karlin said, it's just part of a zeitgeist.
Yeah, okay.
I just knew that there was a boat, there was animals, and then there was that song about how the unicorns didn't make it on the boat.
No, we do not know this
No,
song.
honey. we
Okay, so
don't
there's
talk
this
about
song,
that.
and it's like, and but they forgot about the unicorns. Is the song, I think. And I knew that song when I was little. So all I knew is that there were 2 animals. Noah was there. It was a huge boat, and the unicorns. I think they were like playing, and they didn't make it on the boat.
Oh, that's
I remember
really
what you're talking about.
cute.
yeah, they were like frolicking in the sea or whatever, and then they missed it. They missed the boat, which is why we don't have unicorns. Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah, but I guess I kind of just knew
It was
like
just
Noah's
around.
Ark. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like I know like weird stories. I guess because it's a story, so kids
Yeah.
know it, like Jonah
Yeah.
in the belly of the whale and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, okay.
kinda
So
like a
kids are
fairy
still
tale.
hearing it. Okay, got it.
Yeah, for sure.
So, so Noah takes 2 of all the animals. It rains for 40 days and 40 nights, and the rains flood the earth, and every living thing is destroyed except for everyone on the ark.
Which is just horrifying.
I know.
Because apparently everyone is so terrible that they all have to be murdered.
Including the animals.
They have to drown.
What and like I want to know what, like tell me about Noah. What is his deal? Why did he get saved and everybody else like
Well, you see, he was living a pure life, and so was his
You
family.
see.
he was the only one on the whole planet?
Yes, he was chosen.
Apparently.
He was chosen.
Wow. Okay.
So
Carry on.
So the floods, just destroy everything. And then when the floods are over, Noah and his family and all the creatures could start a whole new life and repopulate the earth with pure, good people and animals. So
And that worked out well.
Yeah, right. We're crushing that. Maybe because it would be incest, right? Like the family has to procreate with each other.
well, I can't remember.
I think that they had wives.
Yeah, I think the sons brought their
had
wives.
Oh, so then they just like did a little swapsy. They did like a little wife swap
Perhaps.
to like mix up the DNA.
I mean, you're not wrong. Eventually, it gets incestuous. It has to.
Right.
Oh, that's true. It does have to.
Okay, so Stack says that, of course, people wondered, was the story real? Was it based on fact? Or was it a legend handed down from
course.
generation to generation as a symbolic morality play in a hostile and corrupt world?
Oof.
Which I definitely, when I was younger and going to church, of course, I believed this was real. But then,
Oh, yeah.
later on, I always thought it was more of like a parable.
Yeah.
So, but then there's just a lot of people out there that take this as a thing that has happened and is
Yes.
exactly as it says in the Bible.
Yeah.
Wow.
Stack tells us that the Bible was actually not the first place that the story of the Ark appeared. He says in ancient Babylonia and Sumeria, the same story was recorded thousands of years before the Bible was ever written. He says it was even discovered in North America, and in the Hopi Native Americans stories, they also told something similar. And in fact, no fewer than 200 variations of the story are found in cultures throughout the world, leading many to believe that there was indeed a cataclysmic flood thousands of years ago.
That is really interesting.
Yeah, we'll talk about all the different cultures that actually have a story like this a little bit later. In recent times, some researchers have seized upon this speculation and gone in search of definitive proof, the remains of Noah's Ark. So at the end of our last episode, remember we were like, we're going to be talking about Noah's Ark. And I was like, oh, wait, aren't there remains? So that's exactly what this segment is about, is these remains and whether or not it's proof of the Ark. Stack says that according to Middle Eastern versions of the story, the Ark was built near the ancient city of Shurapak, which is in present-day Iraq. According to the Bible, the Ark came to rest on Mount Ararat, which is in present-day Turkey, more than 500 miles from Shurapak. Stack says in recent years, several search expeditions have explored the mountains of Ararat, and incredibly, 2 separate teams believe they may have found the Ark. They both believe they have found it in different places, but they are 17 miles apart. One site that people thought they found it in this segment is on the northeast side of Mount Ararat under a permanent 23 square mile glacier. Stack says in 1969, a Turkish businessman named George Hagopian told a story from when he was a young boy. He said that in 1906, he had seen Noah's Ark wedged in a glacier from which the ice had temporarily receded. So they have this archaeological illustrator named Alfred Lee on the segment, and he depicts what Hagopian says he saw.
Okay.
So Lee says, he said it looked like a long box, rectangular, and the corners were kind of rounded a little bit. The sides sloped in slightly. The roof, he said, was basically flat with just a slight pitch to it. And there was kind of a stair apparatus at one end. He says that his uncle hoisted him up onto this ladder and he walked up onto the roof. And there, all the way down the middle of the roof, he saw these holes and he stuck his head in it and it was dark. He shouted out and his voice echoed and re-echoed inside. It was hollow. He says that Hagopian went back a couple years later and saw it again, but ice and snow were starting to cover it back up. And my first reaction when I saw like this depiction of what he saw was that like the structural integrity makes no sense. Like it's so long and skinny. And it's just like, if the Titanic can snap in half, this can snap in like 7 pieces.
Oh, yeah.
Like
I didn't even think about that.
It's going through the greatest flood that's ever existed, and somehow it's fine. Stack says that 17 years later, Alfred Lee, that artist, was introduced to Ed Davis, who in 1943 was stationed in Iran with the U.S. Army. Davis also claimed to have seen the Ark. Lee says, when Ed Davis started talking, the hair on the back of my head just stood up because I could hear an echo of George Hagopian from years before. Davis's sighting is in roughly the same spot as Hagopian's, and they're describing a very similar structure, which is why I think UM chose these 2 to feature. So then we get an interview with U.S. Army Master Sergeant Ed Davis, and he says that we waited a while and the fog kind of lifted and it shone through kind of a funnel and it showed the Ark in the end. You could see the end of it, and we saw both parts. You stand there with your mouth wide open. Lee says Davis described 3 decks and large cages on the bottom deck, smaller cages on the second deck, and a venting system on the roof with many holes so that you could see how the light and ventilation could go clear to the bottom deck. Which was really interesting to me that the only light would be coming from the very top. Like, it just seems like it would have been very, very dark in there all the time. So they show us Lee's illustration and say that in the illustration, Lee has reconciled the 2 accounts. The intact Ark shows Hagopian's sighting in 1906, and below are the 2 pieces as described by Ed Davis. So they're kind of showing it like it's a time progression, where the first guy's sighting is the Ark like upper on the mountain, and then the second guy's sighting, it's fallen down and broken into 2 pieces. However, Hagopian and Davis are unable to pinpoint the exact location of the sightings. But Stack says their sightings helped spark the interest of Don Shockey, an amateur archaeologist. So Shockey says, I can't think of anything more exciting that I could be doing in my lifetime than having a small part in seeing this, whatever it is, verified. And we have good reason to believe there's something there. And his face is so happy while he's saying this.
Oh my gosh, truly so happy.
And he says, we got it. We got to prove it. There's something there.
Aw.
So Shockey launched an expedition to Ararat in 1989. Stack explains the mountain is on the eastern border of Turkey next to Iran and Russia. Stack says that Shockey chose this location based upon classified U.S. satellite photographs, which have been analyzed by an expert. They just say an expert. Who's the expert? What is he an expert of? I don't know. So Shockey and his guides spent 3 days climbing the mountain. Shockey says their goal was this specific spot so that they could verify what the satellite images were showing. But Stack says the Turkish government restricts access to the north side of Ararat. Quote, foreigners are forbidden.
Were you able to find out why?
No, I meant to look that up because I thought that was so weird. It wasn't like they're not allowed in Turkey.
Yeah.
It was like they're not allowed on this side of the mountain.
Right.
Which is very, very odd.
Huh.
So because of this, they have one of the Turkish guides. His name is Ahmet. He continues on with the camera. So Ahmet goes down the north slope of Ararat, and they show us in a photograph of the mountain where he's at on the mountain. So he's at 16,000 feet, and he can see something down below him buried in the snow like 300 yards down the mountain, which he took a photograph of. Stack says it seemed to show a rectangular object with a peaked roof, which in they show the photo, but they use like lines to outline what they're talking about, like little graphics. And honestly, like I didn't see anything until they started outlining it, if that tells you anything.
Yeah.
So the guide comes back. Shockey is like, did you see anything? And he's like, I saw a coop. And he's like, what? And he's like, a coop, like a chicken coop. So he said that he could see the top and the outline of the sides. Shockey says, he said, in all of my years, you've never seen anything like it. He said, there's some artifact there. When Shockey got back to the U.S., he took the photo to forensic archaeologist Dr. Jim Ebert. So they film Ebert telling Shockey what he sees in the photo, and he's like, it doesn't look natural. It looks strikingly man-made. He says, but there's no scale cues in the photo. There's nothing in the photo to tell us how big this object is, which is the first thing I thought of when I saw it, too.
Right.
And this guy being like, it's a chicken coop, and the other guy being like, it's Noah's Ark. I'm like,
that escalated quickly.
Guys, what size is it? You know, he's just like, you can see this rectilinear outline, and it's definitely not part of the glacier. But to me, I'm like, I feel like ice breaks off in, like, linear chunks, like, most of the time. I don't know.
Oh.
I don't know.
Wow, you have, like, a lot of – I watched this, and I was just like, this didn't happen. But you actually have, like, a lot of smart points that you're bringing up that I never would have thought of.
Thank you. So in 1990, Shockey went back to Ararat and did an aerial search because he wasn't allowed to go on the mountain, but apparently he could fly above it. Unfortunately, by the time he did this aerial search, the site in the photo had been completely covered with snow. So at this point, Shockey stopped his search, but he was just certain, like, that's where Noah's Ark is. And Stack says others disagree.
It's like a treasure segment.
I know.
Exactly.
It is exactly.
It's over here. It's over here. Those guys are stupid. It's over here.
It is exactly like that. Author and Ark researcher David Fasshold says everyone thinks the Ark is on top Mount Ararat because that's what it says in the Bible, but he's like, that's not actually what it says in the Bible. It says the mountains of Ararat in plural. So Stack says Fasshold, who was a former Marine officer and merchant salvage expert, believes that the Ark is buried under, quote, this unusual mound. And then they show us this photo. So it's like a green mountainous side, like lumpy, bumpy area. But then there's this very distinct boat shape, like popping up in this mountainous area. This area is 17 miles south of Ararat. Stack says Fasshold's team has made several expeditions to this area and combed the site with a metal detector. So what they've found is traces of iron beneath the surface of the mound, which, quote, do not appear to be natural deposits. Fasshold says every 20 to 30 inches, quote, we have the remains of an iron fitting or an iron pin of sorts that are still there in the soil and discernible. So Fasshold actually shows us an object in his interview, and he says this is one of 5,400 iron fittings we've located. Of course, we haven't pulled them all out of the boat. It's been cut in half by a diamond saw, scanned by electron microscopes at Los Alamos National Laboratory.
5,400?
Yeah, which this part I was like, okay, you found a bunch of metal. Like, that's
Yeah,
something.
why
You
is
found
that
something.
there?
What is
Right.
that?
He says that particular iron fitting is 94.84% man-made wrought iron. Stack says looking at the mound from above, the iron fittings form a distinct pattern of intersecting lines which Fasshold believes is a framework of the ark. From end to end, the lines measure 515 feet or 300 cubits, the length of the ark as recorded in the Bible. The width averages 85 feet or 50 cubits, which also corresponds to the dimensions in the Bible. Fasshold says, given the shape of the thing and the size of the thing and where they found it, I mean, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck until somebody finds something else, what else could it possibly be but Noah's Ark?
Okay. Anything else.
It could be anything.
I always thought the ark was supposed to be just wooden.
Yeah,
I
me
did too. But I guess...
I mean, it makes sense that they'd use other things, but where did they get all that?
Then Stack says, some believe that what Fasshold has found are the remains of an ancient Mongol fort.
Oh.
And others say it is merely a geological formation. But the Turkish government has apparently declared it to be the official site where Noah's Ark came to rest. Fasshold says the man in charge, Professor Salih Bayraktutin, who is also a geologist, says it's Noah's Ark 200%.
200. Oh, that guy was really funny.
200%.
Never been more sure of anything.
Yeah, he was very confident.
Yeah. It's not a geological anomaly. It's a man-made structure. So... And then Stack wraps saying, it's tantalizing to think that Noah's Ark may actually exist. However unlikely it may seem, such a discovery would not be unprecedented. In fact, it was less than 100 years ago that archaeologists uncovered the ruins of the ancient city of Troy, which had always been considered a myth. Finding Noah's Ark would no doubt prove more elusive, perhaps as a story best left as a metaphor, a cautionary tale for a world that has grown even more complex and chaotic.
You have no idea, Mr. Stack.
I know. He has no idea. So, first of all, there are so many people who have searched for the Ark. It's crazy. Like, I knew there would be some, but it's a lot.
Huh.
Hagopian and Shockey and Davis and Fasshold are just a handful of a long list of people looking for the Ark. So, I just pulled up, like, a couple extra things about those two sightings they talked about. So just some extra stuff about the Hagopian sightings. One thing that Hagopian had said was that many other boys in the community had also told him they saw it. Because remember, he was a little boy when he saw it, which I was like, that's kind of interesting. But this is straight from Wikipedia. There was this place called Talk Origins Archive, and they said they took issue with the apparent ease at which children were able to get to the site of the Ark when multiple explorers had issues getting there. I mean, there were, like, some horror stories. One guy, like, fell down the mountain and all this stuff. Like, it was definitely a dangerous terrain, so...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because it's not like climbers. Like, you should be trained in mountain climbing, most likely, to be up looking around there.
But apparently a whole bunch of children just saw it.
Right.
Also, regarding the multiple sightings by children, John Warwick Montgomery points out that dimensions regularly appear greater than they are to small children.
Oh, that's true.
So
Totally.
something might have looked huge to them that was like the size of a normal boat or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
So the formation on the mountainside that they show us where it looks like the Ark is just under the surface of the ground is actually a really famous site. And it is called the Durupinar site. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It is a 164-meter long underground structure made of limonite adjacent to the village of Uzungili in eastern Turkey. So as they said, it's right by the Iran border, and it's just south of Mount Ararat's summit. David Fasshold was just one of many people who believed that because of the size, the shape, the location, that this was like petrified remains of the Ark underneath the ground. So this site comes up again and again and again. And when you look at the pictures, like pictures from today still, it looks exactly like a boat under there. Like it just, everything around it is lumpy. And then there's this like almond-shaped, you know, thing popping up.
I don't understand why they can't excavate it.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah, why don't they?
They keep taking these aerial photos. I just looked at, while you were talking, why foreigners weren't allowed in Ararat or whatever. And it was because the Soviet Union thought that the people looking for Noah's Ark were spies. But that went away like a long time ago. So people are allowed in there. It's just so strange that everyone's taking all these aerial photographs, but no one's actually digging.
Well, okay, because I'm about to talk about, there was some. Yeah. But you're right. Nobody's ever just like really dug in
Gotten
there.
in there.
Seems like. I don't know.
Yeah. It's strange.
So Fasshold has done a lot of ark searching. He's written all these books, and he's like joined several different people's expeditions. And he himself has flip-flopped between thinking that the Darupanar site is the ark and then doubting that it is. So it said, after a few expeditions to the Darupanar site that included drillings and excavation in the 1990s, so they did do something, Fasshold began to have doubts that the Darupanar the Darupanar formation was Noah's Ark. So at one point, they had done this visit in 1994, and he had this geologist with him, and he noted, "I believe this may be the oldest running hoax in history. I think we have found what the ancients said was the ark, but the structure is not Noah's Ark." So he's saying, like, from way, way, way back, people were saying this is, and now it's turned into like, yeah.
Huh.
So Fasshold himself also was like, you know what? It's probably not the ark. And then like right before he died, he was like, no, it's definitely the ark. So he went back and forth on it. Just a little follow-up on Ed Davis. A lot of people felt that the area he said he was in when he saw the ark just didn't really add up to where it was according to the Bible. And Ed Davis also claimed that he saw the Garden of Eden, so... I guess he's just a prolific discoverer of things.
Oh, yeah.
What a lucky man.
So as we know, as Stack mentioned, lots of cultures and religions have the same types of stories, and tons of cultures have this flood story. So there's actually so many that there is a name for it. It's called flood myth or deluge myth.
Huh.
Oh, wow.
And this is from Wikipedia. A flood myth or deluge myth is a myth in which a great flood, usually sent by a deity or deities, destroys civilization, often in an act of divine retribution.
Huh.
Parallels are often drawn between the floodwaters of these myths and the primeval waters, which appear in certain creation myths, as the floodwaters are described as a measure for the cleansing of humanity in preparation for rebirth.
Huh.
Most flood myths also contain a cultural hero who represents the human craving for life.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's in this type of flood myth is in Mesopotamian culture. It's in the Bible. It's in Islam, Hinduism, Chinese mythology, Norse mythology, Irish mythology, Polynesia and Hawaii, the Maya people, the Ojibwa tribe, South America, Africa, the Aboriginal stories in Australia. They all have a very similar story.
Wow, that's cool.
I did not know that. That's fascinating.
Yeah. And so there's even a term called flood geology. And it said flood geology is a pseudoscientific attempt to interpret and reconcile geological features of the Earth in accordance with a literal belief in the global flood described in Genesis.
Oh.
They kind of describe it all and then basically say, in the end, it's a pseudoscience because it's not based on the scientific method. So this was just a quote that I liked from an article about Noah's Ark searches in general. And it said, modern organized searches for the Ark tend to originate in American evangelical circles, according to Larry Eskridge. Quote, an interesting phenomenon that has arisen within 20th century conservative American evangelicalism, the widespread conviction that the ancient Ark of Noah is embedded in ice high atop Mount Ararat waiting to be found. It is a story that has combined earnest faith with the lure of adventure, questionable evidence, and startling claims. The hunt for the Ark, like evangelism itself, is a complex blend of the rational and the supernatural, the modern and the pre-modern. While it acknowledges a depth to pure faith and a literal reading of the scriptures and centuries of legend, the conviction that the Ark literally lies on Ararat is a recent one, backed by a largely 20th century canon of evidence that includes stories of shadowy eyewitnesses, tales of mysterious missing photographs, rumors of atheistic conspiracy, and pieces of questionable ark wood from the mountain.
We're coming for your Ark. Me and my team.
Moreover, it skirts the domain of pop pseudoscience and the paranormal, making the attempt to find the Ark the evangelical equivalent of the search for Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster.
Oh, interesting.
In all these ways, it reveals much about evangelicals' distrust of mainstream science and the motivations and modus operandi of the scientific elite.
Wow.
Wow.
So I just thought that quote was interesting.
Relatable.
Like I said to you guys via text, people still care about this and people are still doing this.
Wow.
There was one finding in 2010, and National Geographic did an article about it. They said a team of evangelical Christian explorers claim they've found the remains of Noah's Ark beneath snow and volcanic debris on Turkey's Mount Ararat. But some archaeologists and historians are taking the latest claim that Noah's Ark has been found as seriously as they have in past ones, which is to say not very. Quote, I don't know of any expedition that ever went looking for the Ark and didn't find it, said Paul Zemansky, an archaeologist specializing in the Middle East at Stony Brook University in New York State.
Oh, that's funny.
So this one was by Turkish and Chinese explorers, and they claimed in 2007 and 2008 that they found these large wooden structures with wooden rooms, and it was all very similar to what we've heard before. And it said another reason scholars are skeptical of the latest Noah's Ark discovery claim is that Genesis, the first book of the Bible, never specifies which peak the vessel supposedly landed on in Turkey. Quote, the whole notion is odd because the Bible tells you the Ark landed somewhere in Urartu, an ancient kingdom in eastern Turkey. But it's only later that people identified Mount Ararat with Urartu, said Jack Sasson, a professor of Jewish and biblical studies at Vanderbilt. Stony Brook's Zemansky agreed nobody associated that mountain with the Ark until the 10th century in BC, he said, adding that there's no geologic evidence for a mass flood in Turkey around 4,000 years ago. The Noah's Ark Ministry's international explorers are playing in a very different ballpark than the rest of us, Zemansky said. They're playing without any concern for the archaeological, historical, and geological records.
Oh, no.
So he's basically like, it's based on nothing.
Oh, jeez.
Gosh.
So biblical scholar Jack Sasson said he thinks biblical writers intended the story of Noah's Ark to be allegorical. Mm-hmm. Another man claimed to have found the Ark in 2014. This man's name was Mark Stetties, and he claimed that he found the Ark using Google Earth. He was using the descriptions of all these different people. He had the Ed Davis one and the George Hagopian one, and he just started scouring that area of Ararat on Google Earth.
What?
There was this interview with him, and he says, this is the Ahura Gorge where they describe the Ark. It's on the northeast side of the mountain, so I rotated the mountain on Google Earth, zoomed in on the side, and I found it up there, said Stetties, as he enlarged the image more and more.
Easy peasy lemon squeezy. I don't know what your problem is, guys.
You start to see it, he said. Here's the ridgeline and beams sticking out of the bottom, and this makes a horseshoe shape right here. And the person who wrote the article was like, you know, to most people, this would just look like some shadows, but he really thinks he's seeing this structure.
Wow. He didn't even have to leave the house.
I know. He just armchair discoverer.
Armchair archaeologist.
So easy.
He also compared the drawing done by that illustrator in UM from Ed Davis's sighting and really thought that it looked like the same thing. The more I look at it, the more I'm convinced I found Noah's Ark, said Stetties. Stetties made his discovery last summer and since then has been sending his images to others who have visited Mount Ararat in search of the Ark to get their reaction. So far, he hasn't had any luck hearing back from any of them to say if they think his claim is credible or not.
Aww. Poor Stetties.
Yeah. And then I found a 2021 article. It was from the Durupinar site, and it was another group that was like, we found it, it's here. So yeah, again, like you're saying, I'm not sure why they haven't really just like gotten in there since that place comes back again and again and again.
The explorers that said that they found wooden rooms and they have photos of it, and
I didn't see any photos.
Right, okay. Yeah, I don't know. You're so right. It is like Bigfoot, right? It's like an evangelical Bigfoot.
Yeah.
There's no photographic evidence. Everybody finds it. Everybody sees it. Yeah. It's really interesting.
And every time, I mean, this is like a full team of people diving in on this. And pretty much every time the geologists are like, guys, it's just rocks.
Wow.
Like, it is weird looking. It does not look like it should be there, but they're saying it's just a rock formation.
Well, those pieces of iron, I think are pretty crazy, but it could be a fort. It could be anything.
Yeah. So, like I said, I don't doubt that maybe they saw something. They probably did see a structure, and people are ancient. So people have been building shit for a really long time.
100, yeah.
Maybe there is something out there, but like Alison always says, it's Occam's razor. Like, what is the most likely thing?
Right.
It is a structure. Maybe it's even a boat. Maybe it's a fucking chicken coop.
Right.
But it's probably not the Ark.
Right. Wow.
It's just interesting to me that people are still doing this. Like, there are organizations and groups for this specifically that are still working.
Yeah.
So,
it's fascinating.
That's it.
Cool.
Great job.
Yeah. That was really interesting. It really was.
I do think it's interesting. And I mean...
Well, and Christianity borrowed from a lot of other religions, right? They kind of, when like the Bible has a lot of stories that are also in a lot of more ancient religious stories, correct?
Yeah,
so
there's a lot of
makes
crossover
sense.
between, because they're allegories, they're parables,
yes.
you know,
Right,
and like
right.
every culture needs those.
Sure.
So, yeah, it's
Cool.
interesting.
Nice job.
Good
That was
job.
awesome.
Oh, thanks.
All right. The second segment is an unexplained death segment. So in November of 1988, 26-year-old Tracy Wofford-Bunn was working as a waitress in Baton Rouge, Louisiana at a Ramada Inn. She had arrived from Milwaukee, Wisconsin 3 months earlier looking for a new start in a new city. Solomon Bunn, Tracy's ex-husband, says that Tracy was a beautiful person. She was outgoing, fun to be with, and spontaneous. Stack says that Tracy and Solomon Bunn had married in 1986. 2.5 years later, the marriage was, quote, on the skids.
I hated that.
Oh,
I was like, oh, God, I remember that term.
Yes.
And,
I've never heard that term before.
oh,
I did
really?
not
On the
like it.
skids? Mm-hmm. So the marriage was on the skids, and Tracy turned to her younger sister, Danielle, who lived in Baton Rouge. Danielle Wofford Simmons, Tracy's sister, says that Tracy had spoken many times about wanting to leave Milwaukee to spread her wings and find something new. So when she went to visit Danielle says that they had a really great time. And Danielle says that she introduced Tracy to different types of people. So at the time, Danielle was attending LSU. So, you know, it was probably pretty cool for Tracy to go down there and visit and meet all these college kids, all different types of people. So Danielle says that Tracy stayed with her for a couple of weeks. Then she went back home, stayed about a week and a half in Milwaukee, and then came right back to Baton Rouge with the rest of her stuff, which is super, super cool. Stack says that Tracy settled in quickly. She found a new job and even had a new boyfriend. It seemed like life was starting all over again. 6 months later, on the morning of April 1st, 1989, outside of an apartment complex, a passerby noticed a young woman apparently asleep in the front seat of a car. Stack then says it quickly became obvious that the young woman wasn't asleep. Tracy Wofford-Bunn had been murdered. Stack then goes on to say that Tracy had been raped and strangled to death. And I wasn't expecting that because in the reenactment, she's sitting up in the seat of the car with her head to the side like she's sleeping, and she appears fully clothed. So I assumed that she wasn't sexually assaulted.
Yeah, and it also didn't even look like there was any struggle. She just looked like she was asleep almost.
Right. And Stack said it quickly became clear that she was dead, but they don't say how it became quickly clear because I would have thought that she was sleeping.
Yeah, that woman must have stood there for a bit.
Or I was thinking maybe she walked by and walked back later.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, like
She
she went to
hadn't moved.
run an errand, came back, and Tracy hadn't moved. So the top half of Tracy in the reenactment is fully clothed. She looks like she's wearing a denim jacket and a shirt underneath. Stack says that oddly, the investigators found no sign of a struggle. In fact, there were a number of odd things found at the crime scene that didn't seem quite right. Detective Crawford A. Wheeler of the Baton Rouge, Louisiana Police Department says that upon examining the body, the clothes were all jumbled up in a way that he had seen before. And it's usually when a person has had their clothing put back on when they are either in an unconscious state or deceased. I remember watching a Forensic Files where they talked about that, and it's really interesting, kind of the way the shirts get buttoned and clothes get put on, that it's really clear to detectives with an eye for it that the person hasn't done it themselves.
Yeah.
So Detective Wheeler says that they also found that the stick shift was broken off in the car. It was lying on the floorboards. He says that he believes that the vehicle could have still been driven, but it would have taken someone with a bit of expertise to drive a stick with the stick shift broken off like that.
Oh.
He says that the thing that was most puzzling was that there was no robbery. Tracy still had her jewelry on. She had her purse and her ID. Wheeler says it was a total loss of life for no reason. Stack says that with no physical evidence to go on, Detective Wheeler turned to the people who knew Tracy best. He started with her new boyfriend, who is not named in the segment. Wheeler says that the boyfriend told him that about 4:30 p.m. on March 31st, 1989, he dropped Tracy off at work, and he kept her car. He and his cousin were driving around in the car, and he was supposed to pick up Tracy that night at midnight. Wheeler says that the shift handle broke off at, quote, Texas and East Polk, and then the boyfriend parked the car and went to his cousin's house, which was about half a mile away, so he walked there. Stack says that around midnight, Tracy called her boyfriend, so he didn't even call her to tell her. He waits for her to call him around midnight, and he says that he damaged the car and he can't drive it.
Yeah.
So she left work and walked to her boyfriend's cousin's house about a mile away. And then there's a reenactment where Tracy tells her boyfriend to give her the keys. Like, she's super pissed off, and her boyfriend's like, what? I don't know. I broke the car. Like, he's such a fucking loser.
Yeah.
So she's like, give me the keys. And he's like, where are you going? And she's like, I got to go take care of this. Like, she can't, what the hell? I hate him.
Yeah.
Like, what a loser. So her boyfriend doesn't go with her. Like, he broke her car. He's like doing nothing but hanging out with his cousin. And he lets Tracy go walk to her car by herself at 12:30 in the morning.
Yeah. I know. I hated it. It was also kind of like, why is she worried about doing this right now? But it's because she was pissed. She was like, we need to deal with this.
Right. And because, like, I don't know about the neighborhood. Like, maybe you can't leave your car. If you leave your car in the street overnight in a certain neighborhood, it's going to get fucked with. Like,
Totally.
it
Yeah.
happens here in Portland all the time.
But also she was probably like, I want to get the fuck away from you.
I hate
And
you
go deal-
right
Yeah,
now.
you're the worst.
And she
Yeah.
might have had to work. Like, there's a million reasons why she was like, I need to handle this
Yeah.
right now. The fact that he didn't walk with her, oh, he's the worst. So Detective Wheeler says that they know that she got to the car because it was locked when they found the car the next morning and the keys were in it. An hour and a half later, Tracy's car was driven to the apartment complex where she would be found the next morning. Wheeler says that the apartment manager told him that there was possibly a witness who saw the car come into the parking lot at around 1:30 in the morning and saw somebody walking away from it. Wheeler says that he feels like Tracy Bunn was probably murdered between the hours of 12:30 and 1:30 in the morning. Authorities are particularly disturbed by several unsettling details surrounding the murder. Not only had Tracy been raped and strangled, there were second-degree burns on her thighs and on the back of her hands.
Right.
I was like, what?
They show, like, I think it's a reenactment of it or a photo of it. I can't remember. But it's like fully the entire surface of the tops of her thighs are burned. It isn't like a
Yes.
little burn mark. And the entire surface of the tops of her hands were burned.
It's so bizarre.
So weird. So Detective Wheeler says they haven't been able to determine what caused the burns. He says they can't find anything that would make that particular burn. He says they also can't understand why the body was left. It was like they wanted Tracy to be found and they wanted everyone to see. We know that killers do that all the time now. Then Wheeler says that he doesn't know if, quote, these guys were involved in narcotics or not. He says, but when you have a case involving people and narcotics and you don't deal with them in the fashion that they want you to, they make an example out of you. And I was like, where the hell did that come from?
Yeah.
Was Tracy involved with drug dealers? Like, there was no, that kind of came out of left field. And then Danielle says that she knows someone personally that is very heavily involved in drugs. And he was trying to make a, quote, drug transaction. And he was told that the person he was dealing with had murdered Tracy. Stack says that authorities did investigate a known drug dealer, but found no evidence linking him to the crime. And yeah, I don't know, like, did Tracy do drugs? It was very strange that that came in. Danielle thinks that her boyfriend knew something because he had her car that night when she was at work. He didn't pick her up. And then when she went to deal with the car, he didn't go with her to help. She says he, quote, just threw her to the wolves at 12 o'clock at night. And she is totally right. Stack says that Tracy's boyfriend and his cousin were both given polygraph examinations and both passed and are not considered suspects. Detective Wheeler says that he has worked a number of homicides and says that it's frustrating for him and Tracy's family not to know who the killers are. So they keep using plural, drug dealers, killers. So I guess they think it's two people. He says they're walking around scot-free today and Tracy is gone. Danielle says it's still difficult to believe that Tracy is gone and that if she were to able to find out what happened, she might be able to get some closure. So then there's an update, and it says 18 years after Tracy's murder, DNA evidence from the crime scene was matched to a convicted rapist named Freddie McKinley. McKinley had died in prison several years earlier, and the case was officially closed. So I was really surprised that there was an update for this case
Me
at
too.
all. I fully thought that it wasn't going to be solved. And when I was watching it, I was kind of thinking that maybe Samuel Little could have been involved because he was in that area around that time. But his MO, I think he picked women up at bars, and a lot of them were sex workers.
Yeah.
So since this case has an update and the killer had already died in prison, I don't have that much information because we can't ask him where those burns came from. We don't know anything about this.
What is that?
The burns are so weird.
Yeah, there's so many unanswered questions. How did he... And I couldn't find any information about him. So I don't know if he was the type of rapist that, hid in the bushes and attacked obviously a crime of opportunity. But what is up with the burns? How? So I found a press release from the Baton Rouge Police Department from January of 2007, and it said Tracy Wofford-Bunn's case was the first Baton Rouge Police Department cold case to be cleared by the LSP Crime Lab through CODIS. Woo! Yay! In August 2005, the murder of Tracy Wofford-Bunn, 26, was solved through DNA evidence. Her killer, Freddie McKinley, was identified, but by that time he had already died in prison, serving a sentence for another crime. And then the last thing I found was a couple articles from The Advocate about filming the segment. So City Police Detective Crawford Wheeler, who was in the segment, he was the one that contacted Unsolved Mysteries to get help. He said, quote, I felt sorry for the girl coming all this way and then getting killed. The story just kind of stuck with me. Unsolved Mysteries researcher Hillary Roberts said that Wheeler's yearning to put the case behind him was apparent in a letter that he wrote to the television show. Quote, obviously, he just wanted to get the case solved so badly. He was so passionate in his letter. Segment producer Annie Azzariti, who was part of the filming crew in Baton Rouge, said that the Bunn killing was interesting for two reasons. Quote, the first thing we look at for a story is there the possibility of doing any good? The second thing is it has to be something that we can dramatize. Wheeler said that he thinks the show could prove to be the best chance he has of clearing the case. Quote, a lot of times people think that crimes have already been solved. I hope that this will refresh everybody's memory and somebody will come forward so that we can solve this. They start talking about the reenactments, and Annie Azzariti says, quote, we need to make it as precise as possible. This could be the clue for somebody who saw something that night. Wheeler said that the attention to detail took him pleasantly by surprise. Quote, I think they went to extreme lengths. They found a car just like the one Tracy was found in. They dressed the actor like the real Tracy. They put a great deal of effort into making this thing as realistic as they could. Also, Wheeler was required to spend more time with the crew than he anticipated. He was interviewed about the case and then played himself in the reenactment of the homicide scene. Quote, I definitely thought it would be a 1-2 day thing. I didn't think it would go into a week, he said. It's been a long week, but I hope it will be beneficial to the Baton Rouge Police Department. Yeah, and that's it. That's all I could find. So a lot of unanswered questions, but I'm glad it was solved.
Yeah.
Oh, but what the heck?
I know the burns are like, what the heck?
Yes.
Yeah, when my mouth dropped open when they said the burns thing because I was like, what?
Yeah, and they said that they thought that the murder happened between 12:30 and 1:30. So it isn't even like he kidnapped her, took her someplace and tortured her and burned her.
Right.
It seems like he kidnapped her, put her in the car, sexually assaulted her, and then strangled her and left her there. So where did they come from?
With the placement of them on her front of her thighs and her palms, right?
No, the back of her hand.
Oh, the back of the hands.
Yeah.
Oh, that's weird. Because I was thinking maybe she was like bent over something hot.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
But no, I guess the back of her hands. That
the
is
back
so
of her hands.
weird.
So strange. So strange. Yeah.
Well, that's very sad. And also, that boyfriend. Come on.
I know. He's the
Yeah,
worst.
like it's not his fault, but
No.
he's still a dum-dum.
In a perfect world, if she would have survived, I hope that she would have dumped him.
Okay, so that was part 1 of episode 22. Come back next week for part 2. Again, we're talking about...
The Lost Loves case of Dolores Stratt.
And then I have a missing segment about Colleen Reed.
Hey.
See you then.
See you then.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Go to patreon.com/Resolved Mysteries Podcast if you're interested in supporting us there. If you subscribe at the $5 a month level or higher, you're going to get ad-free episodes, 2 extra episodes a month, and other goodies in the mail. To see photos we reference in the episode, follow us on Instagram at Resolved Mysteries Podcast and on Facebook and Twitter at Resolve the Pod. You can contact us at resolvedmysteriespodcast.com, resolvedmysteriespodcast@gmail.com, or at our P.O. Box, 14005, Portland, Oregon, 97293. Send us your stories for listener short stack episodes. If you want to email us your favorite unsolved mystery story or cold case or any nostalgia you have surrounding the show, send it our way because we love to hear from you. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you like us, leave a 5-star review and tell a friend or tell 2 or tell 3. Don't forget, for every review we receive, we donate $1 to a different nonprofit. The show Stack goes on to say that Tracy had been the Stack the
Stack.
goes on the Stack the one
Stack.
and only the Stack